Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual panel webinar, Recovery-Oriented Approaches and Mental Health in Latina Communities. My name is Eric Senior. I am the Training and Technical Assistance Manager at the Hispanic and Latino Behavioral Health Center of Excellence. We are very glad and fortunate and privileged to be joined today by our panel members, Maria Restrepo Toro, Yamelieta Rodriguez Froena, and Christine Irizarry. As everyone keeps joining in, I encourage you to share through the chat where you can connect from, maybe your role as a service provider, to get to know a bit about you. And we would like everyone to know that we are offering simultaneous translation to Spanish for today's session, traducción simultánea al español. So if you would like to listen to today's virtual panel in Spanish, click the interpretation tab and then click Spanish. So you hit that globe on your Zoom panel. And from there, you would click Spanish. O sea, para nuestro hispanohablante, si quiere escuchar hoy la presentación.
So for our Spanish speakers, if you would like to hear today's presentation in English or Spanish, we are offering simultaneous interpreting. You can click on the globe or interpreting and then choose your language. Thank you so much for being here today.
During today's webinar, the event is being recorded. All participants will be muted and cameras turned off. Please make sure your computer speakers are turned on and up to hear today's presentation. If you're having any technical issues, please send a message to the Hispanic and Latina Behavioral Health COE on the chat box or myself. I'll try to answer it as quickly as possible. If you have a question for our presenters, we ask that you use the Q&A tab on the toolbar. Type your question and hit send, and we can address that question to the presenters at the appropriate time. We'll have a Q&A sections, so hopefully we can address those questions at that time. And we'll be hoping to share a copy of today's presentation in PDF format through the chat box. If you don't get to receive it through the chat box, we'll also upload that to our website together with today's recording of the session. And once we complete the webinar, we kindly ask you to complete an evaluation, and a link will be shared through the chat for that evaluation. You can also scan the QR code at the end of the presentation to complete it. It's really our form of payment. It's really a way for us to get to know your opinions, your thoughts, your ideas, your feedback about today's session and future sessions that you might like to see. And you'll be receiving a certificate of attendance by email approximately a week from today. Please remember to check your junk folder. It sometimes ends up there, so make sure to check your junk folder for that. Our mission for the Hispanic and Latino Behavioral Health Center of Excellence is to advance and support the sustainability of behavioral health equity by promoting community-driven, culturally grounded, and person-centered prevention, intervention, multiple pathways of recovery, and recovery support for diverse Hispanic and Latinx communities. The Hispanic and Latino Behavioral Health Center of Excellence recognizes the complexities associated with gender and ethnic identification, as well as the right of all individuals to self-identify. The center uses the term Latine with the intention of both facilitating a fluent reading and pronunciation and supporting inclusive and respectful language. Latine is the gender-neutral form of the word Latino that uses the letter E at the end, an idea native to Spanish language. And we are celebrating National Recovery Month now in September. Our center and our sister centers want to recognize the many ways in which Hispanic and Latinx individuals, families, communities understand, live, and experience in recovery. So this is part of one of those initiatives to celebrate National Recovery Month. When we are also celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, and through September 14th to October 15th, recognizing all the contributions to Hispanic and Latinx behavioral health workforce and the communities they form part of inform and provide their vision, their voices. So we're very happy to be celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. Now, before we begin with the panel discussion itself, we wanted to bring forth a few clarifying definitions and terms to help us be best informed for the upcoming questions that we'll have for our panel members. So firstly, what do we mean by recovery? By it, we mean a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. Now, thinking of that change, right? Change can happen in many ways, and there are many and multiple pathways for recovery. Many different backgrounds, many different lived experiences, many ways of seeking and being support and help together. So that's an important framework that we want to keep in mind as we discuss recovery. Now, SAMHSA has delineated four major dimensions of the support of life in recovery. One of them being health, overcoming and managing one's own disease or symptoms, and for everyone in recovery, making informed, healthy choices to support physical and emotional well-being. As we know, culture responsive and attuned practices, settings, supports are part of what helps us bring health through that recovery. Home, a stable and safe place to live. Predictability, having thinking of social determinants of health, right? Thinking of that environment that is so important for us to come back to a place where we feel safe. Purpose, meaningful daily activities such as job, school, volunteerism, family caretaking, creative endeavors, and the independence, income, and resources to participate in society. And as we know, culture has a lot to do with purpose and how we create our social networks and how we create our visions of our future and self-directed recovery process. Community, relationships, and social networks that provide support, friendship, love, and hope. Now, there's also 10 guiding principles of recovery that SAMHSA has outlined. And we want to make sure that we're all aware of them. And we want to focus, and the next two slides, I'll just mention two that may be even more pertinent to our conversation today, that being of culture and that being of hope. So why culture? Why think about culture in terms of the discussion that we're having today? Recovery is culturally based and influenced. Culture and cultural background in all of its diverse representation, including values, traditions, beliefs, are key in determining a person's journey and unique pathways to recovery. Let's remember that culture shapes the meaning to our experiences of mental health, of psychological distress. It shapes how we see help seeking. It shapes how we see our healers. So we want to keep that in mind as we move on to our conversation today in recovery. And recovery emerges from hope. We cannot underestimate the powerful and propelling force of hope. Hope is a catalyst of the recovery process. That belief that the recovery is real provides the essential and motivating message of a better future. That people do overcome the internal and external challenges, barriers, and obstacles that confront them. Hope is internalized and can be fostered by peers, families, providers, allies, and others. So now I would like to formally welcome our today's panel members, and I will hand it off to them so they may be able to introduce themselves. So thank you so much for being here and joining us. It's an honor and a privilege to have you.
Muy buenas tardes para todos. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone.
My name is Maria Restrepo Toro, and I work at the Yale Program for Recovery and Community Health. I am a very proud Latina in recovery who have been in the States for over 40 years, doing amazing work, and currently working in multiple projects at Yale University, including the Leslie Academy. We just ended today the New England Mental Health TTC, which is where I had the pleasure to meet our colleague Eric. So turn it over to my colleague Christine.
Hola a todos, mi nombre es Cristina Irizarry. My name is Christina.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christine Irizarry.
A person with lived experience in mental health, and I am happy to be here today to share some of my personal lived experience. And I also work in the Yale Program for Recovery and Community Health, and some of my lived experience and some of my professional experiences with you all. Very excited to be here. So thank you, y se lo paso a Yamilet.
Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Yamilet Rodríguez. Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon, everyone. My name is Jamilet Rodriguez.
I am a Puerto Rican, Latina, Black, lesbian, mother, person with lived experience and clinical social work. Very happy to be here.
Thank you so much for those introductions, and thank you for again joining us today. So I think now we can move on to our discussion of the questions we have for today. And we would like to start thinking about how we understand Hispanic and Latina values and mental health. So firstly, can someone here or you discuss how the concept of hope, which we mentioned earlier in Samhsa's recovery definition, resonates with traditional Latina beliefs about resilience and healing?
Yes. Yes, I will be delighted to take this first question, Eric, and everybody here on the webinar today. For me, as an immigrant from Colombia, knowing that recovery actually is about hope, because hope really means a better future. So when we go through this process, not only of immigration, but becoming bicultural, right? We need to really learn new things. So when we talk about these values of recovery, we know it's always about a new beginning, a new horizon. I personally have a lot of in my culture, and I can only speak from my perspective, of course, resilience, right? Which is what recovery is all about. And I think for me, the fact that as a Latina, la familia, the familismo, the respect, el respeto, and really the fact that we are a very relational culture. I see recovery. I mean, culture is essential is recovering, has been in my recovery. In fact, it has been essential of my choice of work as a psychiatric rehabilitation practitioner, and now really a trainer in this area for many, many years. So I do believe that we cannot separate. In fact, I believe that for our Latino culture, recovery is an amazing opportunity to connect with each other, to provide esperanza, because it really is open, and it really speaks to the fact that recovery really has many pathways. There is no right or wrong. And I know for me, my culture is very diverse, and we do a little bit of everything, and we take a little bit of everything, y nos encanta todo. So I think it's completely congruent, and this is why I actually decided to do what I do today.
Sorry about that. I was looking for my mute button. Thank you, Maria, for bringing that insightful position in terms of Hispanic and Latina values. So I want to continue because I think this is an important concept about how Latina values and mental health coincide or don't coincide. This next question addresses some of that in terms of also lived experience. So from your lived experience, what are some culturally specific factors, such as norms, beliefs, or traditions in Latina communities that shape the views on mental health recovery?
Well, I want to state that I will talk mostly in this question about my lived experience dealing with mental health and adverse experiences. and living in Puerto Rico, dealing with specific political, economical, and cultural issues due to colonialism. So I maybe will problematize the things that I think collide with the 4 dimensions of recovery. I will say that in Puerto Rico, we have many stigma with mental health issues. So I think that we are dealing, from me, especially that gender role specifics for women, because we always has to be strong. We have to guide the family. We have to look for the kids, for the spouse or partner, and we have to be strong. And if you have a mental health issue and you fail, or your family fail, is you you have to feel guilty. It's because of you. Any other value that I want to talk about is religious. We need to be spiritual in recovery, because we are all spiritual people. But I think we are here are a little delayed in this norm, and just talk about religious significance, that people go to community spaces when they receive information that they have to be faith, and faith is enough to recover. It's just have to be faith and focus on reading the Bible, go to the church, and we all know that this is not enough so people can recover. Any other thing that I will mention is that, as Maria said, we are very resilient people. But in Puerto Rico, since Hurricane Maria hits, and then the earthquakes and other hurricanes and all political chaos, we are listening that we have to go through, we have to go to be strong, we have to go through our adversity. And it is not that we are not resilient, but the state is committing violence and not assuming the response to promote and provide and the things that we need. So I think the resilience issue is that we are not resilient, but state have to provide and stop to commit violence from our community and our people. I think these are the most values that I will relate.
Thank you, Yamilena. And I heard, so many dimensions that you brought in there, from spirituality to gender norms to being, what we sometimes call Marianismo, being la cuidadora and being resilient and always having to be there for the family. And if there's even a trace of I'm not feeling okay today, which we all cannot maybe in that state, there's sometimes stigma, or there is stigma around that, right? And there's also stigma sometimes around how do we discuss this with or without our family, right? Can this leave the home? La ropa sucia se lava en casa. So we think about norms, we think about traditions, we think about culture. We also have to think not only about the ways we connect with our culture and values, but those areas that also within our culture, even politically, can be really obstacles for the recovery process. So I'm thank you for that honest, heartfelt, and transparent response. And now we want to think about how do we align those Hispanic and Latina values with existing recovery-oriented approaches. How do recovery-oriented principles such as peer support, relational strengths, and empowerment fit within that collectivistic nature of many Hispanic and Latina families and communities?
I'll take that question. I think that when we think about recovery-oriented approaches, a lot of the Hispanic Latino culture, Latinx culture, we're very family-oriented. And as Maria and Jamile alluded to, I think that when we say family-oriented or families, oriented treatment, we want to make sure that is the family that we have selected, not the family that we actually have, because sometimes those family members can be not instrumental to your wellness. So I think that in Latino culture, family serves as a crucial support system for recovery-oriented approaches. They can harness, you can harness this as a involving the family as a treatment, but remember, is the family that the person has selected. Another thing that I think is important to think about is a cultural sensitivity. And applying recovery-oriented practices to Latino community requires a lot of cultural awareness. Um, I know that Maria is from Colombia. I'm from Puerto Rico, both Latina women, very passionate about mental health. But our cultures and the way we surround ourselves might be very different. So taking that into consideration, I think is something really important. And I do want to add something about my personal experience. And I was smiling when Jamile was talking about spirituality because um, when I was younger, I suffered a lot of mental health issues, and my initial thought was going to church, right? Because that's what I was taught, and that was what my family had um, shared, and that's how I kind of grew up. So I went to church for a very long time, and nothing was changing, until I realized that I needed more. I needed individualized treatment. I needed people who said, Christina, it's okay to take medication and it's okay to do therapy every other week. And I think all of that requires a lot of support from families or from the family that you have and that you built to ensure that you bring all those recovery oriented principles for a person. And I hope that answered the question, Eric.
Oh, yes, thank you, Christine. Absolutely. I think there's uh, you bring forth again part of the personal experience is what it means to be Latina, what it means to having emerging feelings, distress, discomfort, part part of our national state of being human, right? But also embedded within that culture of how does help look for me and how does it feel that it can look for others around me who are important to me. So thank you so much for putting in that response, Maria.
Eric, so I do thank you. I want to add to what my colleagues just said is because I think it's important, and I see in the chat that people are from multiple backgrounds. This is very important to know that the recovery is not separate. You could be a clinician, a therapist, a counselor, a prevention worker, a person, a family, an ally. Basically, recovery is not separate from the rest. So one can do some clinical work, for example, and still have a recovery-oriented orientation that's centered on our values. Because this is the beauty of recovery, that is not like an add-on, it's actually the foundation for any practice that one may want to do. Some are more, there are skills one can learn to advance it. But I think it's really about from the beginning having this orientation and this belief that everybody has a right to live a life regardless of the illness, because recovery doesn't separate the individual from the diagnosis. Recovery is all about having one person and always working and meeting that person where they are and enable and helping them to achieve their dreams.
Thank you. And I hear that dimension of hope there at the end of that answer as well, right? Being self-directed, but also feeding to those family supports that are important for Hispanic Latinos.
Eric, I'm sorry. I will add that we have to move away from the medical model that that promote fragmentations because we are, as Maria said, complete human beings. So we need attention from a multisystemic, multifactorial level, not only medical level. So we have to move through this idea of boxes and diagnosis and look for the people like people with different needs and not fragmented.
Thank you so much. That's a huge important point, right? Because biomedical model is useful in some ways and it can be a recovery path for some, but the narratives, the embedded ways we speak, the means and we create collective healing, the traditions behind healing, may not fit in that biomedical model that you mentioned, right? So we need to be open, humble, and supportive of that as well, and have it in place within our systems of care. So moving on with thinking a bit about now how integrating recovery-oriented approaches into practice itself, right? When we think about practice provision and in the many settings and many forms and modalities that could be for recovery, how can service providers create an environment that both respects cultural values and encourages mental health recovery in Latino populations?
No te escuchamos, Jamilet. Sorry.
Sorry, Yamila.
I'm sorry. I'm working with mental health and addictions like 20 years, maybe more, and I still learning for my clients and the people who come to talk with us because we are just consultants. When people came to us looking for help, I would like to say that we have to listen with intention. We need to show appreciation for our clients' culture, and I think we need to have always a cultural diversity, self-awareness, and review critically what are our bias, what are our stigma, what we think about our populations, what we think about the different types of drugs, because sometimes we can lead with someone who use marijuana, but when we receive someone who is using heroin and fentanyl, we can deal with that. So same is with mental health. Someone with depression, I can handle it, but someone with a severe mental illness, or I cannot. So I think we need to be open to learn always, practice cultural humility, and recognizing that people are the expert of the life. We are just witness and consultants who offer support. We have to understand the dynamics of the people, the family dynamics, the community dynamics. We have to know the history of the people and let the people talk. And because when people arrive to our offices, we have just a notebook and a pen ready to take notes, and don't let people talk. I here just to offer a diagnosis and tell the people, well, you have to recovery, you have to deal with your situation, you have to move on, or sometimes you have to forget that event and begin to heal. But people don't have spaces that they feel secure, that they feel safe, that they feel acceptance, they feel compassion. And maybe we have to be open and just ask specific questions about the people, their cultural backgrounds, their family, their migration histories, their family traumas. And then when the person can feel confident enough, we can move through the other side. So I think we have to be open. I think we have to show up. I think that we have to show that we really care. When we have someone in front of, just make eye contact, look at the person, be with the person. Don't be answering the phone, just taking notes, filling forms, because to promote recovery, people need to connect, and to connect with the providers. And talking about mental health issues and emotional issues is hard enough. So when one person have the courage to go to ask for help, you have to be there to care, and to show compassion, and to show respect and honor the journey of the person, because recovery is a journey, but it's an individual journey. And lastly, I just want to add that there are many ways to heal. Uh, People can heal with church, people can heal at peer spaces, people can heal at community centers, people can heal in any ways. People in Puerto Rico, we are doing healing cycles. I am doing healing cycles to promote healing in other ways. And we have to honor the ways that people go through find their journey to recovery.
Thank you, Miguel. I think this is resonating a lot with our participants, in terms of when we start thinking again about spirituality, those recovery pathways, and how they contrast or create dissonance in how we're moving towards recovery. And one aspect of that of cultural values, if you mentioned going into intergenerational trauma, aspects of social political violence, aspects of thinking of not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you and your ancestors. And from there, conversations around um, Latino values, right? And respect for the person can emerge. So thank you so much for being bringing this.
Mhm.
I think now we can uh, uh, also think about, when we're thinking about integrating recovery-oriented approaches into practice, think about now peer support, right? A huge component, I think, of the work peer centers do, and US providers may be very familiarized, and those who are listening to us. How can peer support and community involvement, which are key to recovery, be utilized in culturally competent way, culturally humble ways as well, in Latina communities?
So one thing I think about anytime I think about this question is, how would I want to be received? Me, myself, how would I want to be received in any space? Um, and it makes me think about anytime that I talk to someone who's in recovery, how can I be, how can I put myself in their shoes, right? Or their perspective without crossing boundaries, and think about who they are as a person. So I think, like I mentioned before, the religious spirituality was part of my recovery. And I think that part of why that helped me in recovery was because I felt empowered, right? I felt like I was being heard and I was being seen at that time, in that moment that I needed it the most. Um, and so when I talk to someone, I want them to feel empowered and I want them to feel seen. And peer support is a powerful tool. However, I also understand that peers who are Latinos are not as have not been as open to sharing lived experience as other cultures have been, right? And peer support is nothing like extremely new, but it's kind of a sensitive topic to someone in the Latino community because, Eric, like you said before, la ropa sucia se queda en casa. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to share our experiences. And even for young adults, which was a lot of the population that I worked, it was very hard for those young adults to talk about their experiences without thinking about what is my family going to say or how am I going to be perceived or all these different things. So I think that, you know, um, that community aspect, making sure people are seen, making sure that they're open and they're empowered is something that you have to work on step by step, especially in the Latino community. In that has been my experience. If you all have experienced something different, please share it because it's an interesting population. Another thing that I think is using family supports and family promotores de salud, right? Community health workers that have that experience that can relate to that feeling that you have right in the community. I think it's something that is beneficial, and that supports that address unique stressors, right? So recognizing and addressing specific stressors in the Latina community. I know that Jamila brought up like what's happening in Puerto Rico with the political culture. So understanding those things that happen, immigration concerns, economic stability, language barriers that might stress other have additional stressors on people. I think it's really important and essential to recognize in the communities.
Christine, I would like to add that peer support and community involvement take away the responsibility to the individual.
Yes.
And put it in the community so the person can heal in community and can create relations and can have support with community and feel that they have a sense of belonging to a community and not that all the responsibility of the disease and the recovery is only have to be with him or her.
Thank you for adding that, Jamila. It's very important piece.
And I think I want to piggyback on both of you too, because I think another component of this, and I think we did talk about stigma, la ropa sucia se lava en casa, but there is a very important question on the chat. And I think I want to, peer support happens without professional support. They're very completely separate. And I think for professionals working in this field or behavioral health practitioners or whatever you may do, it's important for everybody also to be aware of their own stigma and self-stigma because when we are looking at people from a clinical perspective, and I can be a clinic, I mean, there is sometimes we have multiple hats to wear, right? But peer support does not need a professional intervention. It is not a professional, and some chat and the I think it's important to know that some of the addiction programs, this chat is important, that they may talk about faith-based, they may talk about recovery, but they are forcing people to do certain things, and recovery doesn't for anybody. Is about the journey, is about accompanying people to find what's going to work for them, their families, and their communities.
Thank you so much. And this makes me think about an earlier conversation panel we had this week prior, And I think it speaks to that, Maria, what you're just mentioning about not imposing certain on people, right? Being there with them I'm here to give you a hand, but I'm not going to impose a way or of being or of what recovery should be. But let you find out with us together, right? So I think that's a very powerful sentiment, very powerful philosophy that peer supports embody. Mm-hmm. Now we want to also think about advocacy, right, and more systemic level actions that can be taken. So the role of advocacy in building allies. So what roles does advocacy and collaborating with Latina allies play in promoting recovery-oriented approaches for Latina communities?
So I'm happy to start with that question. And I think for me, when I was reflecting on this, I have to really put myself and use my lived experience as an immigrant. Because advocacy, at least for me in my culture, didn't come naturally when I immigrated. So I think before we talk about collectivism and individualism, so advocacy is extremely important, but I also see it as a skill. I see it as a skill that one definitely promotes recovery, because again, this recovery is about partnering with each other. It's about a participatory process, right? But I know personally, I had to really learn how to also do that, So if I think of this from the perspective of rehabilitation, which is I'm a practitioner of psychiatric rehabilitation, I always look at advocacy as a way of it's something that people need to use in order to achieve an outcome. So I think one of the things I like to think about this is using our own personal stories and culture and Latino heritage to advocate for ourselves. For example, for me, when I came here, I became a student, and then I was studying my master's degree. I realized there wasn't any, I couldn't find a lot of congruency. So that's when I decided to become a champion for Latino communities many years ago, because I figured I needed to bridge that individualism with collectivism. So for me, in order to be a congruence with our values, I look at this more on the realms of advocacy or other kinds of approaches that are a little bit more participatory, inviting people at the mesa, a la mesa, having conversations and using that kind of approach.
So that's a wonderful integration of the things that you're mentioning into those collective actions that are so important. Before we move on, I want to make sure there's if anyone else in the panel might have a question, a response to this. If not, I'll move on to our next question.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Christine. I just want to add that maybe we need to think about share the table, like Maria said, and think about intercambio de saberes. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about what you feel, what you experience. Mine is what, and share and interchange experiences and put on the table the needs, the abilities, the skills, and to do advocacy, all have strengths, so everyone can empowerment of the history and share to make advocacy. And I know that we have to still educating the idea of recovery as a journey, as a long journey with setbacks, and that setbacks doesn't mean that people is not in recovery, because recovery is a journey and it has setback like life. That's it.
Thank you so much, Yamilet.
I was going to add, Eric, but Jamile kind of pull it all together. So thank you.
No, I think that those are wonderful things that you're bringing and important in terms of, because in sharing within these settings, it's that's knowledge as well. And I also think about, and I think was mentioned through the chat, the importance of trust, right? And so we share knowledge. It has to be within a setting of safety and trust that we ourselves as community may know how to create it. And so we take suggestions, recommendations from the people we trust, not from people who we feel mistrust about. So now I think we have the time to open it up for questions. I think there's already some in the Q&A chat. I invite you to add more Q&A questions if you have any for our speakers. So I'm going to start with the first one. Would you from Aquiles Malta? Would you be able how explain how trauma experienced by Latino as a result of the rejection of immigrants by part of the American society can impact the experience or the trajectory of recovery, both in mental health and substance use recovery?
I can do the first part for mental health. Absolutely. I mean, this is huge because this is, again, this is discrimination, this is racism, and this contribute to disparities. This is why people, when they are struggling, in addition to all the barriers, so this is why recovery is trauma informed. There are principles for recovery-oriented trauma-informed practices, and it is essential if we are working before going into any paths of recovery, whether it's mental health or substance abuse. But in the case of mental health, then people are going to have four labels to be that are discriminating, and the first one is probably just to become a Latino. And I can speak for myself because I grew up in my own country. I didn't have any labels until I arrived here. So then you come here to a hostile environment. It's detrimental depending on how you immigrated here. And in addition to that, there is other labels. Mental health labels can be very stigmatizing, especially when it comes to serious mental illnesses like, psychotic disorders, schizophrenia, et cetera, et cetera. So, but addressing trauma, especially in the environment, with some of the, political conversations we hear is just absolutely devastating, and it is detrimental. There's been studies that show that immigration prompts absolutely increases mental health disorders. So absolutely yes. I don't know if my panelists have any other.
Yes, I will add that in Puerto Rico we have the trauma colonialism, and we didn't talk much about that and what it means to have that layer, a political layer, economical layer. And when Eric said earlier that we have to ask people what happened to you and let the people talk, so the people can share their meaning of their trauma, because trauma is define what for the person. We as professionals do not define trauma, and what it means trauma for me maybe is another kind of trauma for Maria and another kind of trauma for Christine. So we have to offer space for the people to talk about what trauma means, and talking about that mental health issues and substance use disorder sometimes are bad coping mechanism resulting from trauma, and we have to honor that spaces to people when people is talking about their trauma.
That's so important. It makes me think of one thing about trauma when you were speaking, Jamila, that trauma both emerges, but is also healed in relations. And that goes to what we were speaking about in terms of those principles of recovery. one, it's relational, right? So we need to be open within relationships to heal that trauma.
Yes,
Yeah.
Eric, and I'm sorry again, Christine. I just want to add that we have to work. People need to work together. If they have substance use disorder and trauma, we cannot fragmentate because we want providers said to the people, I can deal with your mental health issue, but I cannot deal with your substance use disorder. You have to go through there to attend substance use disorder and go to other office to so you can attend mental health disorders, and they go together, and we need to work with that.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to add validating that trauma, right? For societal rejection, which we were, as part of the question someone asked, is also creating cultural sensitive care environments, advocating for systematic changes. I think, yeah, we talk about there's a lot of immigration status happening, right? For example, my parents and my family came from Puerto Rico, and to this day, a lot of them don't speak English, and we live in a predominantly, I live in the US, and a lot of them, everything is in English. So that impact of that, cause of constantly being stressed, of being misunderstood, being less than, not finding accurate treatment because they can't voice, um, is something that, I think that advocating for systematic change and incorporating trauma-informed practices is very key to supporting Latina families, Latina youth, Latina people in general. And all of us, I mean, we're all part of the recovery world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As with the time that we have left, I want to make sure I leave this up if while any other questions come up. Please, as I mentioned in the beginning, fill out our evaluation. You can scan the QR code. Hopefully, if you're not able, you'll get an email. Check your spam folder again for the certificate and for the evaluation to help us know what you thought about today's session. Now, I'm going to check if there's any other more questions. A question from Linda Aguirre. I'm not sure if this opens up another kind of forms, but I'm curious about what types of grants or programs are created to support recovery in the Latina community. What type of grants are there? And this is, I guess, a question about how do we mobilize that policy and that advocacy that we're speaking of.
Yeah. That's a great question. I mean, I can only speak for where we work, and that is the Yale Program for Recovery and Community Health has a Latina recovery project that is it is dedicated to promote resources and train people. It's not a grant per se, but that's kind of our mission. And I think through previous funding, and clearly you have the Center of Excellence, that's like a resource right there. Then we actually dedicated a 5-year programs, which I think are the products that you're going to be getting today, right, Eric? The Dichos video and the cards to do that. Sometimes there are grant funding. We're always looking for that. That I don't really cannot comment because that's a very broad question in terms of grants. But I know for our program, I'm going to put my address in the chat, and where we work, we are invested in promoting Latino recovery.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Eric.
Go ahead, Christine.
That's a state by state funding. There is, I'm sure that if you were to seek some opportunities, it's state by state. I know here in Massachusetts, there's behavioral health agencies that are focused only and solely on Hispanic Latino families, but I'm sure that doesn't happen in every state. So, it's something that it's worth looking for in maybe your state house and researching there. But thank you for that great question.
Yeah, and I will also mention that there's a Center of Excellence focused on peer recovery. So the Peer Recovery Center of Excellence can have many different options and resources, alternative to for assistance in terms of how their ground works and connecting you to other supports within that area. The Peer Recovery Center of Excellence. I know Maria mentioned some resources that we can share. I'm gonna stop our share, so maybe I can share through the chat some of those resources. And if you, any of you in the audience, have resources yourself that you want to share with everyone, please feel free. This is a time and a space to do this. Thank you very much again for joining. This has been a wonderful and pleasant and important, I think, critical conversation with you all today.
Thank you all for joining.
Yes.
Thank you for la invitación. Gracias.
Sí.
No, of course, of course.
Spanglish. Y a los panelistas.
A los panelistas también, claro.
Y a los traductores.
So here through the chat, I'm sharing the walking in recovery cards. They say English, but you can also access them in Spanish as well and Portuguese. And if you didn't have a chance by for some reason to scan the QR code, here are our evaluations links in both Spanish and English. Thank you everyone so much. Stay tuned here for the next a minute. But we appreciate you joining us. You are a very important part of the workforce and in connecting and supporting healing and supporting pathways to recovery. We really appreciate you. Thank you so much.